97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I love coaching this football team. I love coaching those players in there.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Inside the Birds podcast dropped this morning. I mean, you would know that if you were a subscriber like me. You get the alert and you listen to it first thing in the morning. Geoff Mosher joins us each and every Wednesday and Friday for Football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN. And Geoff, I'm not sure if we have anything to talk about concerning the Eagles today.
No, nothing to talk about. And, Josh, I always like to do it first thing in the morning as well. So that's a good comment by you.
Thanks. I appreciate that you appreciate my promptness with the podcast. How about that?
I do. And I appreciate also that you, and I don't know if our listeners know this, but you help out a little bit with the sound element on our Tales from the Blind Side show that has been very, very well received on the Inside the Birds platform with Trey Thomas, Jamal Jackson, and Todd Harrimans. And people really do get a kick out of it because it's just three offensive linemen from the old guard just kind of talking and talking Eagles, and they don't hold back, and they're very funny, but they're also very insightful and informative. So really happy to have that show on. And they dropped yesterday, and they had a lot to say about the benching of Carson Wentz, and all three of them played for the 2008 Eagles team that had the benching of Donovan McNabb, and comparing and contrasting the situations I thought was really interesting on their part.
Yeah, let's start there, Geoff, because you and Adam talked about it on the podcast that dropped this morning. Trey, Jamal, and Harriman's talked about it yesterday. It seems like that even though that's kind of the closest analogy that we have, it seems like there are some very distinct differences in those situations, especially considering the fact that the biggest difference to me, at least my two eyes tells me, Geoff, that I think Wentz and McNabb are in completely different headspaces.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. It's not an apples to apples situation, which is what I was guilty of probably last week when I said on the pod that if the Eagles wound up benching Carson Wentz, they should just do it for a half, let him step back, take a deep breath, and then be right back in the starting spot the following week. And I said that's what Andy did with Donovan McNabb. But I really, I regret kind of putting that comparison on because it's so different. And I did some of the research, and Hunter and I have talked about this. When McNabb got benched, he was in a little bit of a 2-game funk. Remember they had that tie against Cincinnati, go figure. And then they were losing to Baltimore. But at the time, the offense was still a good functional offense. I believe they were a top 5 scoring team. It wasn't like a complete year-long funk that he was in. So what's going on with Carson is it's kind of a mystery, although we can talk about what's led into it, but it's been from the start of the season. And I think he needs more than just one half of football on the sidelines. I do think Doug's making the right decision here. I think Carson does need the rest of the year to just kind of watch and then get rebuilt in the off season we have no idea who'll be doing that job, but whoever it is really has to kind of work from the ground up on getting him back to a functional level.
How much of this decision do you think it's Doug Pederson, one, maybe coaching for his job a bit, and two, showing, look, it's not my offense. This is not my problem. This was a quarterback problem. With a quarterback that works, my offense works. Do you think he's trying to make that sort of statement?
I don't know, Hunter, about what statement he's trying to make other than our starting quarterback, Carson Wentz, has been broken all year long, and he's just, if we want to do anything over the next 4 games, if we even want a chance to survive offensively, he's got to take a step back. But I do think, to what you're asking me, is I think we're going to learn maybe a little and maybe a lot over the next 4 weeks about just how much Carson himself was the problem, and maybe just how much Doug Pederson was the problem. Certainly, if the offense looks day and night, if it looks a lot better, you start to probably ease up on some of the things that we've said about Doug Pederson. Certainly if the offense looks no better, then it becomes, well, it's just not Carson here who's at fault, which is what, I think we all suspect anyway. I think it'll further validate that. But this does give Doug a little bit of a clean slate, kind of like when Nick Foles took over, to say, I've got a quarterback now who's not going to have autonomy. He's not going to kill certain plays. You hear Doug talk about, well, I did have a few design rollouts. They got killed, or I did have more runs. They were changed. He doesn't throw Carson under the bus, but he just explains, what's going on throughout the course of the game. But we saw this with Nick Foles. They design the offense a little differently. Nick never had that kind of autonomy the way Carson does. And maybe if we see Jalen Hurts succeed, knowing that Doug is really the ultimate play caller and not a lot of his stuff is getting killed, then I think then you start to look at Doug in a different light and Carson in a different light.
Geoff, you mentioned about Doug Pederson, the clean slate. He told the media today that a key to Hurts having success is you got to run the ball, you got to get him in rhythm in the passing game. And it felt like as he kept talking, I'm thinking, so are you unable to do that for Carson? It almost felt like he was telling you something about Carson in his explanation for what they're going to do to help Hurts be successful.
Yeah, Josh, I tweeted out that quote, and my God, I already know that Twitter is a dangerous place for any kind of, relaxed civil discussion, but holy cow, the reaction I got. You would think based on people's reactions, and I understand why they feel this way, by the way. You would think, though, that the interpretation of that was that Doug was sabotaging Carson Wentz this whole time and is now going to start running the ball more and adding all this quick game stuff for Jalen Hurts because he likes Jalen Hurts better. I think people need to just, come back to earth a little bit here. And first of all, when Doug says that and the way people reacted, first you have to be in the camp where you believe him. Do you believe that Doug is going to run the ball? Do you believe that he's going to give more quick game routes to Jalen Hurts? I would like to think that he will, but I'm in the I'll believe that when I see it camp, because you're right. He's kind of said these things all year long, and we really haven't seen it. If he starts doing it now, it certainly looks very strange. But I do think he's got to modify his offense to fit Jalen Hurts' strengths, and he does have to be more of a offensive play caller and offensive coordinator because, again, Jalen's not going to have the autonomy to do whatever he wants out there. But I don't think Doug Pederson has been sabotaging Carson Wentz this whole time. I think there have been a lot of reasons why the offense has not been great, why Carson's regressed, why the offensive line has not helped that. But I don't think sabotage is number one on my list of reasons why Carson has regressed.
I'm glad you said not sabotage, because that leads me to my other question. I've been asking this question now for a couple weeks now, and just more like a thinking out loud thing. Mm-hmm. Is part of the problem with Wentz and the Eagles offense that from day one, the Eagles have put so much on his plate? The whole thing coming out of college was how smart he was, high football IQ. He ran a pro-style offense in North Dakota State, etc. Is part of the problem that maybe the Eagles have put so much on Wentz's plate that instead of reeling him back in, they kind of just let him keep doing that, and they're not going to do that with Hurts?
It's a good question. I don't know if I understand how you're phrasing it. Putting it on his plate is the right way. And I said this on the podcast, so you'll probably know where I'm coming from here. But I was almost aghast rewatching the All-22 of this Packers game. Doug's play calling, first of all, did not change very much when Hurts went in for Wentz. Now, someone could say, well, it's in the middle of the game. He didn't have time to build an offense around Jalen Hurts. And all I would say to that is, he had to have known he was going to Jalen Hurts in the week leading up if Carson was going to struggle again, because it was going to happen the week before. We've been talking about this for weeks. It had to be on his mind. He should have had, if he's going to do this, he should have had some Jalen Hurts type plays ready to go for when Hurts got into the game, but he didn't. And the amount of routes that this guy plays, that Doug Pederson calls, that have just multiple. If there's 4 outlets, 3 of them are going to be vertical. Sometimes all 4. If there's 5 outlets, 4 are going to be vertical. I cannot for the life of me understand why you're running so many vertical routes when you have an offensive line that has not been able to protect for more than 2.5 seconds. A lot of these plays The quarterback is asked to do a little fake handoff first, which wastes a few more seconds for the defense to get up. And there's just no capitalizing on some of the soft coverage that they've seen. The Packers played a lot of soft zone. A lot of these receivers had 8 to 10 yards of cushion from the snap. But when your routes are so vertical and they don't, when there's no slant, no quick game, no rub routes early, then these receivers have to run 10 to 12 yards, and the cushion's already there. The cornerbacks are giving themselves all that space. So people say the wide receivers can't separate. It's because they're running against coverages that are already half a mile down the field. And I don't understand when your quarterback can't stay upright for 2.5 seconds, how you're expected to perform under that kind of environment. And for that, I think Doug has really hurt Carson Wentz all year long, because that's been a season-long problem. Just vertical upon vertical upon vertical, and no relief, nothing short for the quarterback to get into a rhythm or capitalize on soft coverage. I think you saw the Packers do it to the Eagles all game. I mean, sure, Devontae Adams had some deeper stuff, but he also had a lot of slants and quick ins and things like that that were designed to get the ball into his hands very quickly.
Not only that, I feel like I've seen players run into each other on the Eagles' part, or they're running similar routes where, is it going to Goddard or is it going to Zach Ertz? It's like, what's happening with this play design? They're both in the same area. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I do want to touch on something, though, that I heard today from Doug in the presser, and maybe I'm blowing this out of proportion. I'll get your thoughts. He said, when asked about Carson Wentz backing up, let's see how this week goes. But I would expect for that to be the case. Now, let's see how that week goes. It almost is saying it's possible that he's not the backup and he could maybe even be inactive. Now, am I reading too much into that?
I don't think you're reading too much into it. I don't think I would be against it either, Hunter. I mean, if your whole purpose is to try to get Carson to take a step back, relax, not feel the weight out there, it's no good to get him right back in the game if Jalen Hurts twists an ankle, right? I mean, I don't know that you're getting your desired result if Carson's got to get back on the playing field. So it might be best for Carson and best for the offense if Nate Sudfeld is your backup quarterback and Jalen Hurts is your starter, at least for, I would say for the rest of the way, but at least for the next few weeks.
Geoff Mosher here on Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. New episode dropped this morning. Make sure you subscribe to the Inside the Birds podcasting network for all the podcasts, not just Geoff Mosher and Adam Kaplan, but the whole team over there. You can follow Geoff on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL. Now, Geoff, with all that being said, what realistically can the Eagles do? Because you and Adam talked about on the podcast that dropped this morning about what the film said about Hurts, and yeah, there were some good things to take away from it, but I've talked to a lot of people in the last few days about what Hurts was in college and what they expect him to be in the NFL, and I'm not getting a lot of consensus about exactly what Hurts can do in year one. So what can we actually expect from Hurts in the Eagles offense on Sunday?
Well, the first thing I can say to that, Josh, is that it's hard to base any kind of assumption on what he can or can't do based on the little time that he got against the Packers. And the second thing that becomes harder to predict is how much of these first 13 weeks of NFL with him as mostly the backup has he developed in that time. It's just impossible for you and I to know because we haven't seen him at practice. Only the coaches have. So I can give you the answer that when they drafted him, a lot of personnel people in the NFL felt that, obviously felt he was a very good athlete, had a nice arm, not the A plus level arm, but right behind it, so he can make almost, most of the throws. But they also felt that he had, and you see this a lot of the spread quarterbacks, like that one read and go type of mentality, where if the first progression is not there and you have the ability to run, you tuck and run. And certainly in that, when you watch the All-22 against the Packers, and we're going to highlight this on our pregame show Sunday, so everybody can check it out. We've got some really good telestration from it from our friends at Leverage Studios. There are times where Jalen ran against the Packers and did not see certain receivers open. And there were a couple of times where he locked in, just like we saw from Carson this year, on one receiver and didn't let a play develop because there was a secondary receiver or tertiary one open, or one that you would anticipate being open based on the coverage that you saw. So there was that. Now, some of that could just be getting thrown into the fire there, some of it without a week's of practice, or some of that can just be what he is right now because of his, what he showed he was in college. I just can't tell you, though, given what he will be like when he gets a full week of practice and he works on some of those things that I just mentioned that were areas for improvement, and how much of that he's already kind of worked on and developed since the day they drafted him.
Do you think that we saw the last of Jason Peters and Alshon Jeffrey? Doug was asked about it today, and it does seem like, whether it's due to health or that's just what he's telling everybody, that, maybe Jason Peters isn't going to be giving it a go, and maybe we see more of Fulgham and Herbig instead.
I mean, I don't mean to be a jerk, but I hope so.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I mean, yeah, I've been screaming about Alshon Jeffrey being on the field now for 3 weeks. Why is he on the field? It's clear the other receivers are hurting and not as prosperous as they once were, like, for example, Travis Fulgham, because Alshon Jeffrey's out there. And it's not like, well, at least you're getting production from Alshon Jeffrey. You're not. So I don't see the purpose of him being out there. And I was in the camp that they shouldn't have brought Jason Peters back from August or even before that, the whole offseason. And yeah, coming in and out of games is not helping a guy like Nate Herbig, who holds his own when he's in there. He's not great, and he's not going to be a starter in the future, but he does hold his own and play adequately and enough to give you continuity if you just keep him there at right guard.
Jeff, how much also is it? It's been suggested that because Hurts spent so much time with the twos and with the younger players in camp and practice squads and scout team, that maybe his familiarity and his connection is much, much, much higher with the other guys. You guys mentioned on the podcast about how much Reagor to Hurts, those guys work together a lot in practice. Is it also maybe to be said that maybe Alshon just doesn't have familiarity with Hurts that maybe a Fulgham would?
And yet another reason not to have Alshon Jeffrey out on the field. I will say there was one play that we saw in the All-22 where if Jalen had let the play develop a little bit more before running, he would have noticed that Alshon he stacked the corner. It wasn't like he had a 2 yards of separation, but he's clearly taller and more physical than the corner that was covering him. And there was a chance there for Jalen to make a play, and it just wasn't made. But I agree. I mean, put guys around Jalen Hurts that he's accustomed to throwing to. And, guys like Fulgham and Reagor, they weren't necessarily first team right away. Reagor, yes, but I'm sure Reagor was also bouncing around. And Hurts was probably, in training camp, probably had Fulgham and Ward, guys that to be able to establish a rhythm with. So they've talked already about the kind of the bond that they have just being quarterbacks. Greg Ward also being a quarterback by trade in college. So you gotta surround this guy with young, hungry players who want to be out there making plays, not guys like Alshon who are just kind of just out there to be out there.
Speaking of Jalen Reagor, it was obvious with that punt return that he could make it happen, and we've been questioning what's going on. They're using Greg Ward. He's just catching the ball. And sometimes you're getting put in a tough situation from an offensive standpoint because you're not returning the punts properly. Do you think that there's a correlation between the bobble with Jalen Reagor and why we haven't seen him more out there in that specific area?
I mean, I believe it was like a couple of weeks ago that he let a punt go over his head that they felt he should have fair caught or tried to return, and he made a defense for himself in the press conference saying it looked like it was over the head, it looked like it was going to go in the end zone, and then he also started playing more offensively. But look, I think again with rookies, they make mistakes. I think last year McCole Hardman, the second round pick, speed demon for the Kansas City Chiefs, he fumbled a couple of punts. He was putting the ball on the ground, but he's a rookie. And he's going to make mistakes, and you can't just completely shelve him when he has the potential to turn a game around on either a punt return or a big catch. And I'm sure McCole Hardman learned for it. He's been a nice second-year receiver for the Chiefs. He's still a good deep threat and an emerging guy. And I think you have to live with that with Reagor. You can't, especially in this year where you didn't have that many camps or a real training camp. I mean, if you got a guy in the first, second round who has explosion, you got to give him a chance to make some plays and redeem any mistakes that he might make.
Jeff, we can flip it over to a quick question on the defensive side of the ball. I got to ask you, because the injury report came out while we've been talking to you, and Fletcher Cox is again a DNP at practice. Second straight week with this neck issue. A couple of weeks before, it was a rest. He's DNP for rest. Should we read into Fletcher Cox in his situation? Because he keeps missing practices since the bye week, and first it's rest, and now it's his neck. It just has this weird vibe to me that I don't understand. Is there something deeper going on with Fletcher that we don't know about maybe?
I don't know that it's deeper. I do feel like that they've tried to give him an extra day off of practice per week at this stage of his career. You mentioned the rest. Now it's the neck. So I don't know how bad the neck is. It probably does get sore after games if it's something that's nagging him. But I think it is an excuse to just kind of give him an extra day. Wednesday is not, this late in the season is not the big practice day. It's the day they get together. I mean, it's important. I'm not trying to say it's not, but Thursday and Friday is when they do a lot of their situational stuff, their red zone, their third down, their blitz package, and things of that nature. So I feel like that's why they take it easy on him on the Wednesdays. And they've done that in the past with JP and other veterans where they just kind of back off a little bit to make sure that they're fresh for the weekend.
Since we're on the defense, what was your assessment of Darius Slay against Davante Adams?
Oh, he was fantastic.
It's so hard because, he makes, before the last two matchups, you looked at Darius Slay like he's doing a hell of a job, and you bring him in here to make those plays against these receivers, and he's there, he's super close, but he's also missing something at the same time. Was the injury a big factor? I mean, what do we have in Darius Slay? Because the big matchups, it seems he's just a little bit shy.
Yeah, you know what? I think you made a good point that's probably going to sound like I'm absolving him, and I'm really not. But against Davante Adams, who's probably the best receiver in football, I felt he was there. Like you mentioned, he was there on a lot of plays. He lost some 50-50 balls. There's like one or two of those, 10 catches where you thought to yourself, man, that's a play that you should probably make. And, the same thing with Metcalf. I thought he battled with Metcalf, but there were about one or two that he just couldn't get to, and obviously Metcalf dropped one in the end zone. So I'm not absolving him. He did not have the Darius Slay standard games, but I also think that the numbers may look a little bit worse than his play actually was. So and maybe the injury did factor into that. I don't think that all of a sudden he's a chump cornerback because he's had 2 rough weeks against really big physical receivers, especially. And again, like you look at Davante, if Jim likes to play corners off, and if he was off, then Davante was just going to adjust, and Aaron and him were going to have that kind of nonverbal communication to take advantage of it. And Davante caught a lot of stuff intermediary as well, and so sometimes that goes against the corner, but you can't do much about it. I think, look, if he has another really tough game against Mike Thomas, who is a great wide receiver but a different kind of guy, he's not. I wouldn't say he's explosive as a Metcalf. He's just very consistent and has great hands and a precision route runner. If he really struggles against Mike Thomas and gets beat over the top, then you got to start to worry. But if he can keep Mike Thomas in front of him and just, be the bend but break style, I think that they'll be all right.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast. New episode dropped this morning. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Hit the like. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, all the platforms. Joins us every Wednesday and Friday for Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Before we let you go, Jeff, I got to ask you the question that we asked at the beginning of the show. Mike Gill put up a poll yesterday. The poll was asking, who is the most unlikable sports figure in Philadelphia currently? And it was Howie Roseman or the field. 74% said Howie Roseman. And I think that vote is a complete insult and embarrassment, because to me, it has to be the field, because the most unlikable person in sports in Philadelphia should absolutely positively be John Middleton. The fact that people have this unmitigated, predisposed bias against Howie Roseman, a guy who was a part of bringing this city a Super Bowl championship, but nobody wants to spend enough time hating on the guy who has done nothing since he became the face of the organization, John Middleton, is a complete insult to me.
Yeah, I always consider when we talk about the unlikable award, right? I call it an award. It's usually a sports standout or a personality who kind of thumbs their nose at the crowd. You've had, Jason Worth was at one point unlikable after he left because of some of the things he said. I'm trying to think of who was it that said something. The guy, the pinch hitter for the Phillies in the Gabe Kapler era. Sean
Rodriguez, yeah.
Right. It's usually now Howie's just done a bad job. He has not insulted the crowd or said anything like that. But certainly Middleton. I mean, Hunter and I talked about this the other day. If you say you wouldn't trade Zach Wheeler for Babe Ruth, I have to assume you mean because Babe Ruth is dead, and so you wouldn't trade him for a dead guy. And that to me is an obvious statement. Of course you wouldn't. But was he insinuating he wouldn't trade Zach Wheeler for Babe Ruth if Babe Ruth was in his prime? Because then you're just an idiot. I mean, what is that?
I just don't understand this predisposed hate for Howie Roseman. It's just so irrational. Like, I get it. Nobody's happy with the Eagles right now, but it seems like Howie Roseman could save a cat in the tree, help a woman give birth on the side of the road on I-95. He could save the world from cancer, and Eagle fans would still hate this guy.
Yeah, I suppose so. Listen, I think he deserves to be criticized. I just, you said versus the field. Now I'll just take the field on that.
Yeah, I'm with the field too, because the field involves John Middleton, and that's where my, as Broads would say, hate the face goes to right now.
All right. Well, now that Jake Arrieta is no longer a Philly, because he's a free agent, I guess that passes.
Well, they saved $20 million, right? There you go.
There you go.
He's Geoff Mosher. Give him a follow on Twitter at Geoff Mosher NFL. Grab the latest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast as our guest. He appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Great stuff, Jeff.
All right, guys. Thanks. Have a good day.
Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash alongside Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4 on 97.3 is being brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now and then match your first spots up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com and win real money with their sportsbook along with casino games from the comfort of your home. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.